Hello and welcome to the Authentic Uprising Show. I'm your host, Jill Simons. I am so excited to grow in the radical art of standing in what God says about you with you today. This show is a place where we pour into our concept of who we are, how we've been created with intention by God, and how we can live out of the freedom that He has for us more every single day. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Jill Simons, and I just love spending every single Tuesday with you. I'm so happy you're here with me today. I have such a wonderful guest who has such a beautiful, unique story of the Lord walking with her throughout her life through His provision. And I think that that's what you find in people that are really authentically pursuing the Lord, is that there's such a diversity and such a beauty in their stories because the Lord walks with us in such individualized way. And I cannot wait for you to hear her story. So my guest today is Ann Baker. She is a wife and a mom and has this beautiful culture in her family of seeking adventure. And I cannot wait for you to meet her. So Ann, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you, Jill, for having me. I'm excited.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of where you're at in life right now?
Sure. So I am married to my awesome husband, Joe, and we have 4 children, 3 boys who are ages 7, 5, and 2, and a daughter named Ember who went to be with Jesus last November. And I'll share more about that later in the podcast. We love adventuring as a family. Like you said, hiking and climbing are 2 of the outdoor activities that are just near and dear to our hearts. We live in Southern Colorado, and so there's tons of opportunities for us to do that and to be outdoors. And so that is really what we focus a lot of our free time as a family on together.
That is such a dream little boy life. Like your little boys must just be like, we lucked out.
they love it. I am so grateful that my kids love being outside. They love exploring. They're just awesome little adventure buddies.
That is so fun. And so we're going to be talking today really about this lie that so many people are stuck in, that God won't provide for them. And you have had, like I was saying in the beginning, there's such beautiful, unique stories that Christians have when there's this element of surrender to what it is that God is asking them to do. And this was very much how you started your early marriage. So share with us about how you started your marriage with Joe and what it was that you guys were doing at the time.
Yeah, so we got married in 2011, and literally right from tying the knot, we bought a gutted Mercedes Sprinter van instead of buying a house like most newlyweds do. And we basically went on tour, as we called it. We were starting a nonprofit organization, and we're traveling to Christian rock concerts, outdoor music festivals, and Christian conferences, trying to share our vision with people and raise money. And so we had a very, very unique first year of marriage. We eventually ended up putting down roots in Colorado Springs, where we live now. But from the beginning of our marriage, it was an adventure, literally from day one. And so it was a hard pill for my family to swallow. I think just to be cutting edge and not really fitting the mold of what people wanted for you. But my husband in particular had this vision to start a pro-life organization. And so we just followed God, not really knowing where we were going to be in a week, a month, even, just trusting that we were where He wanted us. And so we traveled for, I'd say a year and a half pretty consistently with a few other individuals, and we would drive the Sprinter van around to different events and cast our vision.
Wow. That is such a trust-filled, opportunity, obviously. And I think that there's something so beautiful about taking those opportunities when we're young to do the things that we're kind of almost too stupid to realize how truly risky they are.
Yes. Exactly. And I just remember too, like from the beginning, we still joke about this because we had a $3 per meal budget. And like when you're on the road, it's like a lot of eating out. I mean, you have snacks, and if we stayed with like a host family from a church or whatever, which we tried to do, so we weren't sleeping in this van. They would, obviously feed us and things, but we were tight. We would hit up the dollar menu, at McDonald's or wherever we could go. We would put our money together and split a meal. We just tried to be so diligent about sticking to a budget, using our resources well. And yeah, like I said, we really had almost nothing. We bought the Sprinter van on credit cards, went into debt to get it, but we just had this vision of being able to travel and spread our message and our vision. And so we just trusted God.
It's so funny because we did totally different situation, but my newlywed days were eerily similar, where it was just kind of we didn't even realize how risky it was because I had this horrible corporate job. And I was just miserable. And my husband was like, this isn't life. Like, this isn't what we got married to do. And he was a first-year middle school teacher at a private Christian school. So he made nothing at all. So good at it. Such a huge heart for the kids. Like, I was just so proud of his work, regardless of how he was compensated. And even in that, he was like, quit your job, like, go ahead and leave. And I had no plan B and no anything. And it was just what the Lord was calling us into right now. And so that leads into this question that I think is what we don't ask, like bald-faced enough, is, was there ever a time during that time period where the Lord didn't show up for you?
I mean, I think maybe when I was in it, I felt like maybe he wasn't, but looking back, I can just so clearly see that he was in every step of the way, even if it didn't feel like it, even if there was no fruit right away that was being produced. Because we literally grew this organization from me and my husband starting it with no money, not really much of a plan, just a vision. In 2011, and fast forward 10 years, this organization became one of the leading pro-life organizations, probably in the whole world, but definitely in the country. I think it became almost a $10 million organization. We had, I would say, close to 40 people working for the organization. We had an amazing office in the Springs. The organization is still thriving today. And so it's just amazing, really, in a short period of time to see how much the Lord grew our vision and equipped us with resources, the right people to really carry it out.
That is so beautiful. And I think that's a really important point that you made about hindsight, because I think that is where a lot of us get caught in the weeds of like, but today this makes no sense. And not keeping that, really the same vision that God has of our lives is really that long game, like holistic view of it, right? We don't have any concept of that in the moment. And so much of it then becomes about like, will we give God the benefit of the doubt that when we look back in hindsight, this is going to be the way it is.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think too, sometimes people are like, yeah, if I just do this thing and, trust the Lord and, do X, Y, and Z, like it's all going to work out okay. And I don't want to say at all that we were lucky. I believe we were blessed and we worked hard and God gave us the strength to really pursue this dream and see it to fruition. But, for what is the saying? It's like knock down twice, get up 3 times, like you just have to keep going, because there were definitely bumps in the road through that decade that, we sort of thought this is it, or I don't want to keep going, or, whatever it is, but God just gave us the strength and, vision to really give us wind in our sails to keep going.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
So
that's something that we're talking about this week in our content is this idea of, and I'm sure you're familiar with in Joshua 4, where the Lord asks them to take the stones from the Jordan River that he's just opened for them and set those 12 stones up as a marker, and how that vision of like creating these memory stones for ourselves of like, this is when the Lord was faithful. This is what he concretely did, is
yes.
part of what builds the faith for the rest of the journey, for moving forward and not seeing the path, but trusting that it's going to lay itself out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a lot of markers, like you're talking about in that passage, and it's so interesting again, to look back in hindsight and you see that first marker and it's like this amazing thing. And then it just kind of keeps building and you look back and you thought, like that was the best I could imagine at that time. And then it just kept getting better, with the right perspective and the willingness to sort of stick it out for the long haul. I think those markers just get even more beautiful.
Yeah. So after this experience of going through the building of this organization and starting your family together, I think that a lot of us have this idea that like life is just supposed to get easier and easier as you go in your walk with the Lord. But that hasn't been your experience. So share with us a little bit about what your family's been walking through this last year and how the Lord has provided for you in the midst of it.
Sure. Yeah. So this last year, about this time in 2021, I found out I was pregnant with our fourth kiddo. And when I went in for my 12-week appointment, I found out that our daughter had a fatal birth defect called anencephaly, and no child has ever lived through it. And it was just pretty clear that we would only have minutes to hours with her after she was born. And so, naturally, when I first found out, it was almost like this otherworldly experience. Like, is this really happening to me? Like, why me, Lord? I've had 3 healthy pregnancies. I'm healthy myself, no issues. It's our first daughter. Like, almost like, why are you taking this from me? But I wasn't in a posture of anger toward God. It was more of just this deep sadness and sorrow. And I just remember for like the first week that I found out, I went into just a deep depression about it, like just having all these questions and at the same time trying to accept the news that we were told, but also having this element of trusting the Lord that if he wanted to heal our daughter in my womb, that we obviously were open to that, praying for that, but accepting that his will might be for her to be healed in heaven. And so just trying to hold everything with open hands. And I had been reading a blog of another woman. I don't even remember who it was. I think a friend of mine had sent it to me. And she had been in a similar situation, having a child diagnosed with a fatal birth defect in the womb. And so their family wanted to go to Disney World to show this unborn baby Disney World, which is this place that their family loved. And we're not Disney World people, but I just sort of felt like it was this stirring in my heart. And I was crying out to God saying, like, I just surrender this, Lord. Like, I can't carry this burden on my own. And until I surrender, I will not be able to accept reality and move forward and try to walk the journey of grief and the journey of, focusing on our daughter while we had her. I just knew that surrender followed by acceptance would get me to a place of healing, and of really allowing God to work in my life, in my husband's life, and our family's life through the whole journey with our daughter. And so, that pivotal moment of acceptance was huge for me, surrender and acceptance. And then I had this idea. I brought a map of the United States and said to my husband, I want to take Ember, which is our daughter's name. I want to take Ember to all these places, before she's born, because we are not guaranteed really any time with her after she's born. Like, we don't even know if she'll be born alive. And so we were fortunate enough to be pregnant with her like throughout the summer. And so our kids had time off of school. We love to travel a lot in the summer anyway. My husband has a very flexible job. He works from home and so could take time off, could work on the road. And so we took Ember and our whole family to both of our parents' houses. So she got to like actually see the grandparents' houses. And we went to Yosemite National Park in California, which is a near and dear place to our whole family. We went to South Dakota. We just went all over in Colorado. I hiked a 14er with her. We kept climbing and just doing things as a family. So we dubbed her our bucket list baby, because we had this bucket list of all these places that we wanted to take her. And I got all these really amazing baby bump photos, you know, with her. And it was just this beautiful, beautiful season of just trying to find joy amidst the sorrow, trying to rely on God through it all, even amidst all the grief, even, you know, amidst such horrible circumstances. And I do feel like we had a lot of peace through it. And one of my main prayers to God was that he would help me to walk the journey of grief well. I did not want to waste the tears. I didn't want to waste the heartache. And I don't believe that, you know, God would really let you do that. But it was just such a specific prayer of mine, that I wanted it to be used to grow me, to grow people who saw us walking through this, all of it.
Yeah. And that's such a beautiful approach, because I think that, like you said, the Lord uses everything, but there's a whole new level that gets opened up when we also cooperate.
Yes. Yes. And ask, you know,
yes,
for exactly what we want. So yeah. Yep.
That is really beautiful. And if you're listening on the podcast, you can't see, but behind Anne is one of these beautiful photos of her family with her baby bump, with baby Ember. Where are you at in that photo?
So we are actually at the Glen Erie Castle, which is part of the Navigators organization. It's a beautiful conference center, kind of. There's a lot of people who rent it for different events and conferences, and you can also go there and walk around. And
it's gorgeous.
Yeah, for family photos, very unique.
Yeah. Is that in Colorado?
It is. It's in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
Yeah, the Navigators headquarters are
yes.
Here. Yep.
Such a beautiful photo.
Yeah.
But I think that is something that story that you share illustrates so much the actual power that we have in circumstances that we can't control, where there's so much that God has gifted us in the fact that we do retain our free will, even when there's these circumstances that are out of our control. Obviously, nobody willed this for your daughter, but to look at this situation and really say, okay, how can we submit this circumstance to God through what our family is going to do with this, is just really, really beautiful testimony. And I just thank you so much for sharing that story.
Yeah, absolutely. She was born on November 4th. And like I said, lived for an hour. And it was, you know, I said it at her funeral, the most sacred hour of my life, just having this daughter that I got to enjoy. I mean, obviously past that, but to enjoy alive. And, you know, another huge prayer of mine, very specific prayer, is I just remember asking God over and over, please just let us get one family picture with her alive, like all of our family. I wish I had that now to hold up and show you. But he gave us that gift, and we had a professional birth photographer there who documented the whole thing for us, who has become this wonderful, dear friend of mine now. And that is one of my most prized possessions earthside, is this family picture of all of us with our daughter. So my boys with their sister. So that is another huge provision that God gave us.
Absolutely.
Something small, but it means so much to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Cause I had a daughter between my 6-year-old daughter and my 2-year-old son, and she passed away on November 1st when I was pregnant with her as well. And so I just very deeply know these feelings. Yes. And it's, I mean,
very close
Yeah.
stakes. That's why I said, wow. So
Mm-hmm.
the fourth and the first, but yeah,
Yes.
it's just a pain that you don't wish on anyone. And it's confusing and you don't have all the answers, but yeah, just trying to accept it and make the most of what you are given,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I think that was just such a huge turning point for my husband and I. You know, our kids were still, and they still are pretty young to really comprehend it. But I think it was just good for them to see us being so deliberate and showing them that we honor life and we value life no matter the circumstance, the quality, you know, any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that we really wanted to do well for our children as well, to be a good example to them.
Absolutely. Well, and I know that, you know, your whole family has been so active in the pro-life pro-life movement. And
Right.
I think that that is another thing where it's just a really powerful testimony to like how sacred this is, regardless of the length, regardless of the situations, like it's absolutely equal to any other life that could enter the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It almost felt like it was almost like a test of our faith in a little way, you know, and a test of these beliefs that we held so strongly. And so grateful for the situation. And our daughter, obviously we want her here alive, but we weren't given that. And so wanted to bring glory to God through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I always find a lot of consolation in thinking about like how then our family has a foot in heaven already.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it was cool having the heaven conversation with our kids. And even at the burial, my husband shot off like a model rocket signifying that she was going to heaven, even though her body was under the ground. And so yeah, it's cool having those conversations with kids, because I think in a situation like this, it feels a little more real because it's like somebody that they saw and it's their, you know, their sibling. And so there's more organic questions that come from that, and just a really neat opportunity to share about God and heaven.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so as you have walked through this as a family, what is really like the things that you've taken away from these experiences that will then continue to inform how you show up to your life to continue to rely on God's provision, whatever he throws you guys next?
Yes. Well, for sure, one of the main themes, I feel like that's been throughout my life, and as my walk with Christ, is surrendering and then freeing up the space to accept the circumstance God has given me, or you know, the situation, whatever it is. So surrender, acceptance, and then moving forward. And I think, you know, with our early days of starting our nonprofit to walking the journey with Ember, our daughter, there was a lot of unknown. There was some things that were very known, but through it all, just saying, Lord, it's yours, and, you know, work in me as you will, and help us to do it well, to, you know, finish the race well, like it talks about in the Bible. So that is definitely one of them. Another huge thing I think that has made a lot of this possible is just having a husband who is on the same page, you know, someone who is willing to take risks with you, to go into the unknown, who encourages you, who's there with you. I call them my deep darks, you know, when you are just profoundly sad or discouraged or angry or whatever it is, somebody to travel there with you. And then also taking what God has given you and just, again, accepting it, but not focusing on what you don't have, focusing on what you have, whether it's material things, whether it's a circumstance or a situation, and trying to work out your faith within that. And not saying, oh, if I had this, then my life would be great. Or if this one thing about this situation I'm in were different, then I would be able to walk through it better, or whatever it is. So that is definitely a big factor, you know, and then having this perspective, or, you know, allowing yourself to feel certain feelings. Like, I don't think it's bad to feel anger, to feel discouragement, to feel tension, but not staying there. Like for me, when we were first diagnosed with our daughter's birth defect, it was like for a week, I was just depressed and profoundly sad, but then I knew that staying there would not get me anywhere. So, acknowledging feelings, feeling feelings, and then sort of getting out of them and moving forward, however long that may take, and you've heard it, grief is like not a linear process. I'm still, as are you, with your daughter, it's just so different for everyone, and acknowledging things, so definitely those few things I talked about, I think, are big takeaways.
And I think that it's so valuable, like you talked about, not staying in things, to really nurture that curiosity about like, okay, what could help? Like what could move forward? What could allow me to, surrender more fully, and to really pursue those resources. Sometimes it needs to be therapy. Sometimes it might need to be medication. Sometimes it might need to be, I need more time with the Lord, like in our family life or whatever the situation might be, but to really look at like, what is it that we could add to this situation versus like, this is the full circumstances, and be kind of fatalistic, I guess.
Yeah. Or you have to do it all on your own.
Yes.
Because we have sought a lot of therapy, while I was pregnant with Ember, even after, going to therapy as a couple, like you said, medication, whatever it is, I don't feel like you have to do it on your own. I think that God gives us tools, and the help of counselors, to walk with us and help us navigate those feelings.
Absolutely. And also for people that might be hearing your testimony about the importance of Joe in your life, that also God sends us these people in other ways sometimes as well.
Yeah. I mean, I have made some of the best friends of my life in this last year as I walked through the journey with Ember, just friends that were friends before, but like showed up in whole new ways for me, that entered into friendship on just the deepest level, crying with me, being there for me, just so much. Like the beauty that has come from the ashes has been amazing. And again, another indicator of God's provision, that even though I would never choose the situation, I didn't ask for it, there can still be beautiful gifts that come from it. And, just all glory to God through it, really.
And he really does work all things for good.
He absolutely does. And I don't know, it's just made me such a, like more well-rounded, more real person. I feel like, the grief just really, I don't know how else to explain it, but a little more authentic,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There's always that deepening when we walk through the hardest things that really builds, I think, our capacity also to like love the way that God does.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yeah. And in my case with this particular situation, just having more compassion and more awareness for people who have walked through the same thing. So yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably from your story with us. I just really, really appreciate your witness.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast app, make sure that you hit subscribe so that you can get all of our updates automatically in your app on YouTube. And we also ask that you leave us a review or a comment. If you're in a podcast app, leave us a review. That helps us get seen by more people. And on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know what you loved from the episode and send it on to a friend. I am sure that you know someone who really needs the message in this podcast from today. I also encourage you to check out Pink Salt Riot. That is my company that sponsors this podcast. We have an incredible online shop full of all kinds of beautiful and unique Christian lifestyle goods. You can shop our whole line at pinksaltriot.com. I'll see you next week.